Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Hope everybody is having a good week so far. It's been a long day. Been a long day. You know those days. On a great note, though, I am so happy that I have this new mug. It's so fantastic. So, fun fact about myself and my own nonsense is that I have this unhealthy obsession with all these fun sugar skulls. I don't know why that is. I'll be frankly honest with you. It's just this weird thing. I love sugar skulls. I love the art. I love the culture behind like the, I guess you could say the anyway, I enjoy sugar skulls. They're a lot of fun. Anyway, so we are going to have another Mortiel Fallacy tonight, and we're going to be discussing a kind of very complex topic. We're going to kick down the music just a little bit more so that way it's not overwhelming. But, so here's the thing, is that when we're talking about a lot of these topics, pretty much all of them, in some fashion or another, have a bit of complexity to them. They're in and of themselves a kind of nuanced topic that's not well understood, hence why I'm talking about them. If everybody understood them perfectly fine, there would be nothing to talk about, right? If there wasn't a gross amount of misinformation from various sources for various purposes to serve various agendas, then there would be no reason to try to cut through that with kind of a more logical and reasoned approach. But you know, it could be worse. You know, we could be trying to claim that you know, that empiricism is irrational. But you know, I would never do such a thing. I would never pose the question asking if empiricism is irrational. That's not something I would ever do. So in any case, tonight we are going to go on the topic of talking about brand marketing and the ethics of it. And so to start things off, we're going to start things off kind of slow. And by the way, hello to La Pasulia in chat. I did see your comment there. I just space cadet and get distracted by things. In any case, to start off brand marketing, we have to first understand what is a brand, right? And very simply put, as this kind of really kind of encompasses everything right here with this guy here. A brand is a name, term, design, symbol, or other feature that distinguishes an organization or product from its rivals in the eyes of the customer. So the important thing to note with this is that a brand is a symbol in and of itself. It's something that is representative of something else. It's kind of a stand-in, if you will. It's a way to kind of classify something, right? And of course, the picture that it shows that's really tiny that you guys can't see up here because I kind of strip away a lot of the formatting, is it shows a picture of the Ferrari factory, I believe. And it's got a Ferrari sign out front, and obviously Ferrari is a very well-known established brand, right? You see the word Ferrari or you see that signature stallion, you know that's Ferrari, right? If you see Lamborghini spelled out, or if you see the bull on that triangular shield, right? You know what a Lamborghini is. Heck, you could see the car itself could almost be seen as a brand because the cars have such a signature, distinctive style that they themselves kind of are representative of the brand itself. So it's kind of interesting. So important to note here that branding is not 100% a marketing concept. Yes, brand marketing is a form of marketing that uses brands, but branding is not in and of itself like an inherent marketing thing, and isn't really bad in any way. It's just a way for someone to identify something. You know, it's just like calling somebody a name. I'm Mortiel. Hello. That's my brand, if you will. It's just any way to signify something. Fun fact on here, I do love this fact. The practice of branding is thought to have begun with the ancient Egyptians, who were known to have engaged in livestock branding as early as 2700 BCE. Anyway, so here's the thing, is that branding is something that's been around for a long time. People want to understand what something like that branding, livestock branding, is a little bit different. It's not the same thing as a brand in the term, like in a market term, I guess. But you know, in any case, the whole point is it's not like using symbols to identify something is a very old concept. So what we're gonna get into though here is kind of the way in which branding marketing exists, and kind of how it really can have some issues, and where it kind of can take a downturn, and what psychological effects that brand marketing can manipulate in order to be an ethical problem, and furthermore, how to avoid doing that. So the first thing is that you know, in this article here, these are both this one is from marketingschools.org, and it kind of you know, lays out a pretty clean concept of brand marketing, right? It says, you know, comparison shopping involves more than just checking prices, and it goes on to explain that brand is one of the ways that people will use to signify the quality of an object. For example, if you were to go into a Walmart, right, and you see, let's take for example medicine, right, you see name brand Alka-Seltzer, right? Alka-Seltzer is a very well-known brand, I guess, to some people that might use Alka-Seltzer. Anyway, point is that you see the name brand Alka-Seltzer, and then you see its discount, whatever Walmart's generic brand, I think it's Great Value, right? You see the Great Value brand next to it, and you see Alka-Seltzer, and you see Great Value, and Great Value has a little bit more plain boxing, not as flashy, not as shiny, you know, doesn't say it's new and improved, that sort of thing. Ingredients wise, they can almost be identically the same. In fact, in some cases, they completely are. However, the issue is that people will see the box, see the brand name, and in their minds, they connect that with quality. They also connect that with expensive. So when people see a brand name versus a generic, especially in medicine, this is very common in medicine, people will hear the word generic or generic brand for a store-owned brand like Great Value, and they'll say, oh, that's less expensive, which is also not true. There are many cases where the generic is just as expensive or more expensive than the name brand. That aside, there is still that connotation in our mind. We develop these connotations to a brand, right? So, for example, the two I just named there are the price and the quality, right? And those both, price and quality, kind of develop the value distinction in our brains of a product. So when you see Alka-Seltzer and you see its name brand equivalent, or its generic brand equivalent, Great Value, you know, and whatever, and you see, well, the generic is lower quality, but it costs less. There in your mind, you have to kind of make that value determination in your brain of, is the less cost worth the less quality, right? And that's the thing. That's the thing, is that essentially whenever you're developing a brand, that's really what it's for. It's for, in people's brains, developing a value distinction of a product. And it also comes with reputation, connotation, and that sort of thing as well. The problem is that brand marketing can also come with a certain amount of laziness, and that's what we're going to get into when we talk about the actual ethics values on here, right? So before we go too far into the ethics, though, let me not get ahead of myself, whenever you start to see brand marketing, right, the objectives of it, and these are really nice laid out here, is that you should be able to come up with like what the object stands for, right? What you're selling, your product. What does the brand conjure, right? And not to use an unethical example of this one, but when people used to kind of conjure up the brand of Marlboro, right? The cigarette brand. Because of the marketing and the branding done on Marlboro, you would think of the image that would be conjured whenever you think of Marlboro would be a cowboy out on the ranch, you know, that classic American Wild West, you know, and he's got he's got a 6-shooter on his hip. Okay, maybe not a 6-shooter, you know, more modern day than that, but the point is that he's a cowboy out on the ranch, just him, the open plains with a horse, and he's got his cigarettes, and that's kind of the instant message that's conjured when you think of that brand, which obviously there's been a lot of issues with cigarette marketing in ways that it's handled a little bit not so nicely, like for example Camel with their Joe Camel advertisements of you know, thinking, hey, here's a cartoon character of the Fonz in camel form, right? He's got a leather jacket, white t-shirt on. He's a 50s greaser, but he's also an anthropomorphic camel. In any case, the issue is, or the objective there is that when you hear the name even, you have an image in your head of bashing microphones apparently, but you have an image in your head exactly of what that brand, what the message of that brand is, what it's conveying to you. Victoria's Secret, let's be honest, what is it conveying? Sex. Even though Victoria's Secret has a wide range of female undergarments that are not necessarily related to sexual intercourse, Victoria's Secret's brand largely and heavily relies on the sexual nature of what undergarments are. If you see a Victoria's Secret commercial, what do you see? You see supermodels walking down the runway in ridiculous garments, angel wings. They're posing very seductively. It's designed to sell a very sensual experience, and that's the message that they're trying to conjure with their brand. Even though what they're selling isn't always necessarily sexy. Whatever, seems to me like that might be a little bit too niche, but the thing is that at least in the past it's been shown that sex, or at least in certain markets, that sexual advertising can be effective. We'll also talk about that one too. Another objective is it should enhance your credibility. This doesn't necessarily mean that you're being honest or that your brand is honest. It should, when it says credibility, that means that it's connecting your brand and making people think that your brand is the choice for what the message is that you're conjuring. So it's the kind of the pinnacle of what that message is that your brand is conjuring, I should say. So for example, with Victoria's Secret, you know, whenever it's conjuring this very sensual kind of theme to it, right? It is the pinnacle. Like, they are a trusted source and making you feel sexy. Like you are relying on them to know what will make you feel sexy, right? That's the idea of credibility on there. It's not necessarily that they're honest, it's that you trust that their message is accurate. That's the best way to kind of look at the credibility of it. The next objective is to prompt an emotional affirmation, right? That is more or less that you have that connection to the brand in some fashion or another. For example, going back to the Marlboro advertisement, the open plains, you're free, it's just you being a man's man with his horse and your cigarettes, and it's kind of this this classic American ideal of freedom, of kind of just being yourself and defining yourself however you want. That creates a very strong emotional connection to a lot of people. That idea of being their own person, being independent, being free to do whatever they want is really alluring to a lot of people. That's that emotional affirmation. It really pulls at you, right? And then the next step of a brand marketing should be motivate the buyer. You don't just want to elicit emotional response. Obviously I could have gone with the sexual one with the emotional affirmation there, but you want to motivate the buyer, right? You want them to buy the product, right? You don't want it to just be, hey, look at these sexy women wearing lingerie. Okay, thanks. That's it. No, you want to elicit them buying it. So if you are Victoria's Secret, for example, using the sexy lingerie, right? You don't want them to just be like, hey, here's pretty, like they could show attractive women nude, although that would cause legal issues, but they could just show women nude, right? Wow, that's sexy, right? Except there's a problem. What's missing from that equation? Yes, your product. You want your product in there being associated with the attractiveness there, so it motivates the buyer that, hey, if, for example, from two different perspectives on here, hey, I want to be attractive, and they are attractive wearing that outfit, therefore I would also be attractive wearing for that outfit. Even though it's not necessarily the case, that's what they're trying to elicit there, right? The other side of it is that, for example, the other side of the equation, the significant other in that scenario or what have you would say, oh wow, that woman looks attractive wearing that lingerie. Well, if my female significant other was wearing that, she would look attractive too. It's kind of creating that, motivating you to want to buy that product, right? And then the final thing is of brand marketing is to augment customer loyalty. And this is the trickiest part here, right? So how do you get customers to buying your product, right? Which sometimes is fairly easy to get them to buy your product, but how do you get them to keep coming back and buying your product? And more importantly, keep buying your product and telling other people that they're doing it, because that's really what customer loyalty is about, right? Is that you want them to tell other people that they're buying your product, because that in of itself is just exponential marketing. And it's not necessarily that this would happen, but if one person buys something and they tell 5 friends, and then those 5 friends tell 5 friends, and so on and so forth, 13 cycles of doing that, and everybody in the world has heard of your brand and heard that people have bought it, right? So that's actually pretty straightforward on how that works. But the thing is that in order to augment that loyalty, you have to create what I like to call a subculture. And this is where we get into one of a very, very well-known and very affluent brand nowadays, Apple. How has Apple done so great at creating customer loyalty? They have created almost, not necessarily that they created it, but they kind of coincided and linked themselves up to the creation of a kind of a stylistic subculture, if you will. And that would be kind of the typical hipster, right? What used to be, many people might call a yuppie at some point in time, but essentially going to Starbucks, driving their Toyota Prius, and they've got their iPhone, they've got their MacBook, right? It's this whole link together of stylistic choices in that, so to speak, hipster, right? Is that Apple sells that kind of subculture, that exclusive, we are intellectually enlightened, and we have this exclusive group because we have Apple products. Even though, like with iPhones, the majority of people in the United States and a minority of people around the world also have iPhones, so it's really not that exclusive. but they're trying to sell that to you, and it creates this kind of subculture where you feel like you're part of an in-group for having their products. That creates customer loyalty. That's also a bit manipulative and not really, like, you having an iPhone or a MacBook does not necessarily make you part of any in-group, because various people from various different cultures might use a MacBook, and you could be sitting next to each other both using MacBooks and say, well, I have nothing to talk to you about because we're not even remotely coinciding in what we're doing. Coincidentally, we just both happen to have MacBooks. That's something that's kind of where I see as being a little bit deceptive when you're trying to affect the human psyche, which we're also going to get into with some of the marketing ethics, right? Now, as we kind of go down on here is like, and these are some of the old things on here, but when people used to think that a lot of brands, and this is from 2011, but some people that have sold their brands exceptionally well, and this is worldwide, right? When you think of Coca-Cola, right? They are I would say they're one of the most well-renowned, I wouldn't say renowned, they're well-known brands around the world. You know, to the point where there's a certain group in the United States that refer to almost any beverage, cold carbonated beverage, as a Coke. Is it Mountain Dew? It's still a Coke. Like, it baffles me, but that's how kind of prevalent that Coke's branding is, right? And people trust it based upon it being an extremely overly sugary beverage that's may possibly be unhealthy for everybody, and we've been drinking it for a long time. You know, whatever. They have still established their brand and marketed it very effectively. IBM used to be, I would say that their market is more niche, especially nowadays since they've moved largely to pretty much to high-end deep learning and AI infrastructure markets. You don't really see them much even in enterprise or commercial use. So their brand has largely fallen out of the public eye because they are focusing their brand marketing elsewhere. But once upon a time, especially in the late 90s and early 2000s, they were one of the it brands before Lenovo bought out the ThinkPad brand, but that's another story. Microsoft, Google, Intel, Apple, Hewlett-Packard. You notice the common trend of these guys, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these top 10 companies are all tech companies. Are 60% of all businesses in the world tech companies? I highly doubt that. However, those brands are like, one of the things with technology is that you are your brand with technology, especially if you're software like Microsoft. That at this point, the Windows operating system largely sells itself. Like, it's so ubiquitous that nobody even considers that there might be alternative options like Apple. You know, Disney's branding is a little bit confused at this point, because when I think of Disney, right, as far as a brand, I think of, you know, the children's cartoons, you know, like Snow White and Aladdin and Lion King and that sort of thing, right? And Disney World and so on. Most people don't realize that Disney is a massive corporation that owns a lot of entertainment mediums. They own Marvel, for example. They own one of the other big guys. Anyway, they own a lot of stuff, right? And I think they are, if I'm remembering correctly, and don't quote me on this, but I think they're actually planning on buying Fox, like 20th Century Fox, like, you know, the Fox, which would mean that they have a very secured foothold in the entertainment industry for years to come. And people very much underestimate just how much they own. If like, you guys are gonna go see The Last Jedi this year, Star Wars, yeah, everybody loves Star Wars, right? Yeah, it's owned by Disney too. Yeah, they own Star Wars. They own, you know, a lot of brands that you would think are very popular. What Disney does very well is they don't dilute their brands, right? They own all of these different properties and these different IPs, but they don't directly market them as, hey, this is Disney. No, they keep Disney with its own tried and true, it's trusted, the brand name and the consumer loyalty they have built up over the years for those IPs, and they keep those names static, right? Star Wars, they're not saying Disney Star Wars. With Marvel Comics, they didn't change the name to Disney-Marvel. No. They leave Marvel, they leave Disney, or they leave Star Wars. They leave these things with their own names so that those brands continue to thrive, because the branding on those is extremely important. In any case, let's see. I think this guy's pretty much done on here. If the brand fails to achieve results, considering the following factors that require specific attention. The quality of your product or service could be bad. Competition, bad timing, poor location, lack of demand, poor resonance with the target market's values. Yeah, actually, this is a pretty good one to go down through. I actually am going to talk about this because these can be overcome, and oftentimes are, with slightly less than ethical marketing. So let's first talk about product and service quality, because this can be easily overcome with clever marketing. As I talk about it, for example, when you have something like, let's take Samsung for example, right? Samsung people usually kind of get the image of pretty sleek, high-tech, fancy stuff. It looks good, it's pretty. Like, you get a Samsung TV, they look sleek, they look shiny, they look premium, right? You'd be shocked to know that a lot of their products are made rather cheaply. They're mostly plastic, right? They've increased the quality of their brand over the years, but once upon a time, everything Samsung was just cheap plastic crap. Well, not crap, it was good enough. But they had this way of marketing it as kind of slim, sexy, lightweight. You know, if electronics can be sexy, but you get the point, is that they try to get this kind of, this very alluring image of them with like the dark colors. That's the reason why they always go with these kind of dark colors with silver highlights to them. It kind of creates this very elegant image, right? And that really kind of helped them override, even though their products weren't the best quality, they actually still sold them better than others. And now, as they've gotten richer and richer off of a lot of it, they end up selling higher quality things, like the more recent Galaxy S smartphones are actually considerably better quality than once upon a time what they were. They used to be pretty cheap. Competition, if your product and branding are too similar to your competitors, then you largely won't stand out. This, in and of itself, is actually a lot of the problem that happens for self-made, businesses, especially, for example, YouTube content creators. There's a lot of small YouTubers out there that make decent quality content, but their branding and their what they kind of offer is so hard to distinguish from everybody else that they will never see the light of day because they just don't stand out from the crowd. Bad timing. Let's talk about your branding having bad timing. And let's talk about, for example, the show The Punisher. That is a great brand that Marvel has under its belt, right? The Punisher is very well known for, in comic book circles at least, and fans of that genre of medium, right? And it's great and that has a trusted name behind it that a lot of people would rely on. But unfortunately, when your brand marketing for the Punisher is coming out right at the during a time whenever gun violence is particularly high, it's bound to generate some bad press, and that's not necessarily what you want to associate your brand with. And that's unfortunately when bad timing comes in. I don't necessarily see there is, and to be fair, you know, I'm not saying that the Punisher is about someone who's like a mass murder or anything like that. No, the thing is, I can't really see any better time for them to have released it because of the fact that it was happening so often. Like, you know, delay 6 months, and then you're just, if they would delay it 6 months, release it next year. First of all, there's no guarantee that there would not be another mass shooting then or something else horrible happening. Second of all, and more importantly, that cost them a lot of money to delay that long. So that would kind of suck. Location, this mostly has to do with physical, like stores and that sort of thing, but it can be in a digital sense of where you place your content. For example, I am a business and I'm trying to advertise myself in 2017. Trying to advertise on MySpace in 2017, probably not the best idea. If MySpace still exists, I really don't know. I don't think anybody knows, because you haven't, and none of you know either, because none of you have fucking been there in like 2 decades. Don't even try to lie to me. Okay, not 2 decades, but you know what I mean, like 15 years. None of you even know that. Lack of demand. Yes, if you are in an oversaturated market, you might want to change your product or look at another product launch, because chances are there's a lack of demand. You have so many markets out there nowadays that get flooded by clones and repeats. Like the mobile app market is a good example of that. You go on the mobile, like Android in particular is one of the worst on there. You go on there and you try to tell me a brand that you really associate with quality for a mobile game. Like a mobile game right now in your head that you can say, that's quality. Chances are it's probably a brand from somewhere else. Like, for example, some people might say, hey, Pokemon Go was good quality. Debatable. But that's because they know the Pokemon brand from elsewhere. Mario Go, same thing. But after you get outside of those few examples, or maybe like Hearthstone or Elder Scrolls Legends, you know, those digital card games that are ported from IP elsewhere, like the actual name, you know, Hearthstone, right? That's very well known as a desktop game that's ported to mobile. Elder Scrolls Online, hell, the only reason that has any popularity at all is because Bethesda's milking the brand of Elder Scrolls. The thing is, once you start getting outside those IPs that come from outside the mobile market, I can't right now. I think there's was it Goo or Glue or something like that is the only brand I can think. I can't even remember that. I think it's Glue. Was it GLU? I think that's the only brand I can remember offhand from the mobile store, and it was only because they really fucking annoyed me. That's it. Like, their brands are so analogous, I don't know if I can remember a brand of something that was online that wasn't from elsewhere that I know it. You know, like Blizzard, I know their brand from elsewhere, and they also happen to be on mobile. So that's where your lack of demand, because the market's so oversaturated, I can't find your brand out of anybody else. However, because of the fact that some of those brands are from elsewhere, is the only reason they get any attention. Poor resonance with the target market's values. This goes back to and values are constantly shifting, but this might go back to that Punisher example I used before. Right now, the target market's values might not be wanting a vigilante, ex-soldier shooting up people during a time whenever there's a lot of gun violence. That's unfortunate, And that may have not been the case 6 months ago, but it is now, you know. That also could come into, you know, some ethnically sensitive subjects, and poorly targeting your, like, ethnic marketing in a stereotypical manner will definitely get you on the wrong side of a lot of values of your intended audience. So that's something that a lot of people fail at, because they don't really understand what they are doing. And let's talk about this one, because this is a good example of where I can bring in EA and throw them under the bus, and I'm gonna do that pretty much any opportunity I get, right? So with EA, they had a lot of poor resonance with their target market's values of late. And the way you can kind of look at that is that when Battlefront 2 came out, they already had 2 games that were in the pipe that were late stages of development that already had loot boxes tied to progression in the game, right? Battlefront 2 was just the first to be released, but you also had the Need for Speed, whatever the fuck it is that was coming out. Excuse me. And then you also had UFC 3 that's coming out early next year. These games were already in the works. They were already pretty much done. They're just finishing stages. Maybe UFC 3 might have a bit more to go, but it can't be a lot if there's only a few months left. So the point is that they had already lost touch with their target market's values a long time ago. Nobody, like, if you look back as far as I can remember, everybody always gets angry over games that are pay to win, right? That microtransactions and payments are tied to progressions. Personally, myself, that I didn't have as much problem with that as I did the unethical loot box gambling, but that really wasn't what most of the people had a problem with. It was actually the tie of the microtransactions, not necessarily loot boxes, just any microtransactions, to the game's progression. That's really what people had problems with, right? And I think that's unfortunate, because I feel like that's the lesser of the evils, but that's really where their values are at. They want to feel like their time in the game is being treated with respect. And most gamers view someone who comes in and buys their way to victory as being less of a, you know, less qualified to play the game, we'll say. And so whenever they see a game company that allows a player to come in and win with their credit card, they see it as their time not being respected. That is not a new concept. That is very old, very well established. Everybody knows. There's a term, pay to win, that has been around for a long time for a reason. And it's not pay to win is not a term that is used with a good connotation. This is something that, had EA been properly resonating with the values of the gamer audience, then they would have realized that, hey, that's probably not a good idea. And there's been several videos pointing out, and several posts in various websites pointing out that there were ways that they could have monetized, especially with loot boxes. As much as I fucking hate them, they could have monetized the game without tying it to progression. However, they essentially had to, after a lot of pressure, had to back off of Battlefront 2, supposedly due to the pressure from Disney. But they had to back off of it. They didn't want to. They wanted to continue doing what they were going to do. They would not. I would very distinctly imagine that if that is the case, where Disney pressured them to disable the microtransaction system where you can pay real money, they would have kept it in the game no matter what people would have said, because they just don't have the same values as their customers. Their values are manipulate and juice people for as much money as possible, and the customers want to have an enjoyable experience. And that's the thing. There is this concept that you may hear tossed around, especially if you are in corporate culture already a lot, especially as you get up high levels in corporate culture, like executive levels, you'll hear a lot of people talk about companies that sell themselves as an experience company, right? And the concept of this is that your company is not necessarily selling a physical product. What your company is focused on selling is the experience of that product, right? So the example that I use for this is, for example, when I'm selling a video game, the focus of what I'm building is not necessarily around the physical video game. The focus of what I'm selling is around the experience you will have. So, and this comes in various facets. First of all, you have fun playing the video game. There's social aspects of the video game, so you have fun with friends while playing the video game. Create those memories, create those stories that you can tell, right? Secondly, is that the company, you feel involved with them. You feel like they're part of your group, right? They are just as much into the game as you are. You guys connect. You have that positive experience of feeling like that it might as well be you making the game for you. That's an experience, right? For example, Mass Effect 3, despite it having loot boxes and that being a problem, Mass Effect 3 was a game I would say was correctly marketed, at least the multiplayer side. Well, actually no. The entire trilogy, you will say, was correctly marketed as an experience product, right? And BioWare at the time was correctly kind of positioning themselves as an experience company. People were buying their products not because of the graphics, not because of how many hours you could play the game, not because of any potential tangible gain that they might have off of it. They were playing those games for the experience that came from enjoying those games. So, for example, playing through the single player game, you have the initial varied experiences of the story. Then, on top of that, you have the culture around it of going out and telling other people what choices you made. And then people saying, well, I made this different choice. Oh man, and this different thing happened. And you learn all of these new things around the game, right? There is so much variety in that facet alone that a subculture of fan got created within BioWare for just talking about, like, who are you romancing? And it was so fantastic seeing that built. And the developers, BioWare themselves, got involved in it, were part of the conversation just as much. Mass Effect 3 came around, kind of closed out. Yeah, people outraged over the ending of it because at that point they were so tied into the experience of the games thus far that when they got to that end, they felt kind of let down by it. And BioWare did their best to fix that. And that's not really the conversation on here. But when it gets into the multiplayer, you again saw a very similar situation. The game itself was a rather repetitive gameplay loop. Let's be honest. You fight hordes of enemies for 10 waves, extract, get credits, open loot box, get random stuff, which usually wasn't what you wanted. Go back, play another mission, get another loot box, over and over and over again until you vomit from how boring it is. Except people didn't. They didn't find it boring because the experience. People would get in there with their friends. They were all these hardcore Mass Effect fans that loved all of the intrinsic lore and things behind the game, that were also playing the multiplayer. They were having fun with friends, and the developers were actively discussing and talking to the players, making little tweaks. Oh, the Geth plasma rifle feels a bit weak. Let's boost up the damage a little bit. Oh, this other gun's a little bit too strong. Okay, we'll trim that down. Weekly balance changes. It felt like they were right there next to you as you were playing the game, right? It drove this experience that caused it to be one of the most phenomenal successes for a tacked-on multiplayer. It wasn't even meant to be the focus of the game, yet somehow it ended up being the most popular part of the game. That was just phenomenal out of nowhere. Then they wanted to repeat that. And I can't argue with BioWare for wanting to repeat that success, because I guarantee you they made quite a bit of money off those loot boxes, because that's the way loot boxes are. People love to gamble, and gambling, especially gambling addicts, you get a lot of those whales that spend thousands on the game. They want to recreate that in Dragon Age Inquisition, and they seem to be staffed the fuck up, ready to go. They whereas Mass Effect 3 multiplayer seemed like they were kind of at first ill prepared for the amount of popularity the multiplayer initially had, and then they kind of quickly staffed up and started dumping out content for the multiplayer like crazy. Like, so much content coming out from Mass Effect 3's multiplayer. Within the first 3 months, you had like double the amount of characters and weapons, and then they kept adding more, to the point where you just had so much variety, the game took forever to get old, because you were constantly facing new enemies, new maps, new characters, new weapons. There's so much variety that it took a long time to get boring. The thing is that when they approached it with Dragon Age Inquisition, they kind of forgot that whole experience part. Right, so I kind of feel like they were feeling a little bit arrogant with where they went with Mass Effect 3, and kind of felt that they were entitled, right? And that's where they fell out of resonance with their customers' values. What really drew the players into Mass Effect 3 was the fact that the developers, everything, it was that experience that really drew them into it, and the developers being an active part of it and being down right there on the ground with them. They felt like they were equals. They weren't like, the developers weren't on a high mountain, some gods among mortals type of thing. No, the developers were just normal people. They were sitting there like having a conversation with them like a normal person, and they get to pick their brains about the game. With Inquisition, and Andromeda largely repeated this exact same mistake, BioWare kind of felt like distanced themselves from the player base for the large part. They didn't seem like they were nearly as involved at first. Inquisition, about halfway through the post-launch development cycle, there was a gentleman named Luke Barrett that worked at BioWare that stepped into the project, the post-launch support, and he managed to, with bringing back that same experience, that on the ground, talking with the fans, joking with them, and being just a normal person. He breathed a little bit of late game life, or late stage life, into the multiplayer. Unfortunately, it was a bit too late. By the time he got involved, it had already been 6 months of the game languishing in largely dwindling numbers, because of the fact that the previous folks there did not know how to handle post-launch support and bringing that experience to the players. And that kind of brought this entitled feeling that people just felt like BioWare's like, you can give us fucking money and we don't care about you. That's when you get that poor resonance with the target market's values. And I feel like that's kind of where BioWare is going right now, is that I don't feel like that they are resonating with their target market at all. They have no idea what their players' values are. And I think that can be represented as EA as a whole and all of their subsidiaries. And in fact, most of AAA gaming doesn't seem to really resonate much with their target market's values very well at all. What they're focused on right now is creating games that have entertaining enough gameplay loops, entertaining gameplay loops that can extend on for a long period of time or near infinity, with microtransactions, usually RNG, loot box gambling, so they can continue to get that recurrent customer revenue, or whatever they want to call it. Essentially, they want to keep getting money for an extended period of time off a game, which is totally makes sense. But what's going to start happening is you're going to see more and more of these Battlefield 2 incidents where the AAA's lack of real coming out with unique ideas. Like Destiny 2 was largely not well received by a lot of people because they were like, okay, this is what Destiny 1 should have been, but it's not very interesting. It's kind of boring. Even though Destiny 2, I'm certain there's still a ton of people playing it, and a lot of people find it fun. A lot of people also had the voice that was boring because of the fact that it's uninspired. And that's because the AAA games industry as a large whole has fallen out of resonance with the target market values, and it's going to start to diminish their results very quickly. Like EA stock has skyrocketed over the past 5 years due to multiple successes that they've had. But it's going to, if you are someone that plays in stocks, you're going to see their stocks start to plateau and start to go down and steadily decay because they're going to continue to make the same exact thing and just keep trying to juice people full of money. Anthem is going to be essentially a Warframe / Destiny wannabe game that's all designed to have an addicting gameplay loop, get people to buy microtransactions. Same thing as all the rest of the EA games. And it's sad, but that's what happens whenever you don't know your audience. Hell, I don't think there's many EA executives that play fucking video games. Like, for example, I know a lot of executives, okay? I know, from CEOs of companies, down to, junior VPs and that sort of thing. The good ones tend to try to stay in contact with what they're selling, right? And they're all selling something, be a service, infrastructure, whatever. The point is that what they do, and the best ones I've seen, they usually, the first thing they do when they walk into a company is that they will get down on the ground, so to speak. They'll find out what it looks like on the lowest rungs of the service ladder. So for example, if you're selling video games, that executive would go and play the video games that they're selling. I don't see how you can run a digital video game publisher without understanding video games. That's the sad fact that I just can't fathom in my brain how you can do that. But I've dwelled on that one fucking long enough. Let's go and kind of wrap things up with some marketing ethics. So and this is something I do want to talk about on here. This is actually a great one here. I love this question on here. Is marketing inherently evil? And this is something that I might have even kind of misstepped and inherently said before, that marketing was inherently deceptive. And you say is a popular anti-marketing stance is commonly discussed in the blog sphere or the blogosphere, whatever, and popular culture is that any kind of marketing is inherently evil. The position is based on the argument that marketing necessarily commits at least one of three wrongs. It's damaging to personal autonomy. The victim of marketing in this case is the intended buyer, whose right to self-determination is infringed. I'll get into how that's not true, but we'll see. Causing harm to competitors. Excessively fierce competition and unethical marketing tactics are especially associated with saturated markets, such as the mobile market, like I was saying. Then, on the next one here, manipulating social values. The victim in this case of a society as a whole, or the environment as well. The argument is that marketing promotes consumerism and waste. See affluenza, ethical consumerism, and anti-consumerism. I would say it can do more than that. For example, manipulating social values. There's been many cases of models incorrectly setting expectation on body image and making women think that they need to be super skinny, leading to an increase of anorexia and bulimia. There's also, like I was talking about before, Apple selling that kind of hipster lifestyle, right? Which creates a whole new set of social values. Those are arguments that can be made. This one in particular, the victim of marketing in this case is the intended buyer whose right to self-determination is infringed. Damaging personal autonomy. Now, I will say this much. Marketing research has gotten to such an advanced state that current consumer protections have not kept up with it. What I say by that is that they do a lot of psychological analysis and focus testing in their marketing research. To give you an idea, most people don't realize marketing is a $200 billion a year industry. $200 billion. Would you be shocked to know that 1/3 of that nearly, not necessarily 1/3, but pretty close to 1/3 of that is entirely in and of itself done into research. $70 to $100 billion, sometimes as much as it's around 30 billion was one year. The next year that drastically increased to nearly $70 billion spent on marketing research. So when you're doing that into effect, that is a huge industry, $70 billion. There's not that many billion-dollar companies out there in the world. To give people an idea, most people hear Google or hear Apple and think, man, all these billion-dollar corporations. There's not that many of them. There's not that many billion-dollar corporations out there. $70 billion industry means that you could have 70 billion dollar companies in that industry, and there's more of them because there's not that many marketing companies that are billion-dollar companies. There's hundreds of marketing research firms out there. I know this intimately, how they work. They do focus testing, they do brand analysis, they do top to bottom research on your entire brand, what your target market is, where your most efficient marketing strategies are, and most importantly, the psychology of your customer. Where is your customer's head at when they're buying your product? Victoria's Secret, right? When you're buying lingerie as a woman, where's your head at? Victoria's Secret knows. What you're thinking, if you're in Victoria's Secret right now, buying lingerie, trying it on, looking at yourself in the mirror, seeing how, man, I kind of like the way this looks on me, right? Victoria's Secret knows exactly what you're thinking. If that doesn't creep you out, I don't know what else would. That's the whole damaging personal autonomy, is that people are concerned that the amount of research done into marketing has gotten to the point where companies could, in effect, completely manipulate you into marketing or into buying their product without you necessarily actually being intending to. The example of this that I give in the loot box scenario is that when you're playing, say, a game like Overwatch, right? And you start off playing Overwatch and you're just playing the game and you get done with a couple of matches and you've leveled up once or twice and you get back to the main menu, which it takes you back to the main menu after every match, if you notice, deliberately. You get back to the main menu and you see loot boxes and you can see a gold package next to that loot box menu item. That's the reason it brings you back there every time, just in case you have one unopened. And then it will sit there and bug you. That message won't go away. No. It's going to let you know. It's going to keep telling you, hey, I've got a loot box for you. Why don't you come over here? Just come down here. There's even a shortcut on, I think, one of the menus of the screen where it just takes you directly to the loot box to open up loot boxes. Right out of the match. Skip the menu, just go right to the loot box, right? Then when you get to the loot box screen, the little box is sitting on the ground. It's vibrating, right? It's the little peaks of light. Oh my, something exciting's in there. And then you click on it. You click on open. It explodes. Light everywhere. Flashing sounds. Oh my, this is exciting. You see those coins fly up in the air. It's super dramatic. There's a gold coin. It's got extra sparkles on it to let you know that it's legendary. They all land in a resplendent fashion, especially that extra legendary one, which is highlighted in that shiny gold. You have your now legendary skin. Congratulations. Would you like to buy more? The concern of that is that the game's entire design and focus is to get you into that loot box screen, open up those loot boxes so you can start to, and as I was talking about the psychology before, it starts to build that response trigger in your brain of the enjoyment, the dopamine release of opening those loot boxes. So you become addicted to it and you want it more. Then as you progress and go down the line, then you start to get them less and less up to level 100, and then after you're level 100 it tapers off and you get them at the same rate after that, but it slows the progression down as you level up in that game up to level 100, so it builds that withdrawal in your brain. You're not getting that dopamine anymore. Don't you want it? Don't you want to feel good? Don't you want to feel the excitement of opening up another loot box? Come on, you know you want to. Just go into that loot box screen. It's okay. You don't need to have ones ready to open. You can just buy some more. And then again, like I said, this adds the further pressure on top of that withdrawal whenever you have the limited time skins like Halloween or Christmas time, New Year's time, whatever time that they do the limited event skins. And in those ones, now not only are you not getting that dopamine release, don't you want to feel that dopamine release again? Come on, man, it kind of sounds exciting. But now, oh man, there's extra dopamine release if I buy in the next week. Oh my gosh, I really got to get in there because after a week I won't be able to get those things. Oh geez. It's all designed as a psychological trick. That is what people are concerned about with damaging personal autonomy, is that you're being psychologically manipulated. The thing is, though, is that those are not 100% infallible. There's no guarantee that those tricks will work. That's the thing about psychology, is that it's a motherfucker. It's never a guaranteed thing. Neither is any science. This is where kind of the claim of that it's inherently evil because it's damaging your autonomy. There's no guarantee that it is. That's just a perspective thing. Now, causing harm to competitors, yes, I do find it very disgusting whenever a company tries to spread misinformation to damage their competitors. And I suspect this has happened a lot, and we don't necessarily have any proof. For example, I believe, I'm pretty certain that whenever the Xbox was first announced, or shortly after it was announced, I'm pretty certain that there was some subtle anti-advertising, as I call it, that was being done by Sony shortly after the Xbox was released to try to kind of drive the narrative of the negatives of the Xbox, which worked very fucking well, because as we are right now, the PlayStation 4 sold twice as much as the Xbox One. So that's something where I'm kind of I'm definitely anti monopoly, and I'm pro competition. So the manipulating social values, I think that's correlation does not equal causation. A correlation that a social subset has developed around a product does not mean that product created that social subset. So, for example, Apple marketing the whole hipster image, the Starbucks coffee, the Toyota Prius, and that sort of thing, advertising that in their products, I think, is actually a reaction, not a proaction. I think that they are doing that because it is a social subset that developed around Apple products. They recognized it and are capitalizing on it, rather than the other way around where Apple is creating that social subset, if that makes sense. Now, these are the specific issues in marketing. And this, some of it starts with marketing research, right? And this is what I was talking about with the how it can kind of run into issues. And first of all, invasion of privacy. In which case, the coming into contact with sensitive information of the customer, almost every company I know of has very specific rules on how to handle customer proprietary information and how you aren't to fucking touch it. Like, they don't even want to get close because they will get the fuck suit out of them, and they know it. You know, and that's one of the reasons why people talk about Google selling your information. No, Google does not sell your information. That would actually be harmful to them in multiple ways. First of all, they would get sued because they sold information without explicit consent. And furthermore, and more importantly, it would put them out of business. They want to keep your information, keep it secret, keep it their own, and then they can act as the middleman between you and advertisers. Once they show their cards to the advertisers don't need them anymore. So that's kind of the key on there. Now, stereotyping, this is where going back to the whole body appearance and that sort of thing, but it also goes further than that. Whenever you talk about, like, yes, models, the popular one is models and anorexia, but it also could be stereotyping ethnic groups, right? So, like, for example, let's take Lugs, for example. I remember Lugs, the shoe brand. Back in the day, they did a lot of stereotypical marketing towards urban ethnic groups. So you kind of saw, like, Lugs being advertised as this is the smooth gangsta from the inner city New York. Like, I would see people like, dude, that's not really, you know. And some of them liked it, but I saw some of them that were kind of annoyed with how it was pretty much stereotyping like gangstas, and like not all of them were like that. But that's the thing, is that you have to be very careful because so marketing does involve a lot of stereotyping, and it's kind of a good cut, or a upside downside is stereotyping your audience allows you to kind of get base demographics of who you're selling to. But it also can allow you to, if you, again, fall out of resonance with your customers, you start advertising a little bit off to one side. So instead of, you know, shooting the guy in the head, you're missing your shot and shooting the guy behind him. So anyway, then we have the next one on here. Ethical dangers of market audience include excluding potential customers in the market. Selective marketing is used to discourage demand from undesirable market sectors to disenfranchise them together. This actually has actually happened. Now, where I'm trying to remember. Trying to remember exactly where, if it even has it on here, but there was back in the day, there was some rather frankly racist marketing tactics that were used to discourage people of certain ethnic groups from buying property in certain areas, and it was part of a I think they called it redlining or something like that campaign. And there was a lot of marketing done in that, and that was definitely unethical. Nowadays, and this talks about saying that, contrary to popular myth, that ethics and profits do not mix. Well, the truth is, and this is the sad fact of the matter is that they don't. And it's the reason why is because the more dishonest you can be with your marketing, the more you can trick people into believing that your brand is high quality and that you are worth loyalty. The more you can fleece people and lie to them and have them convinced of how good you are, the more profitable you will be. Ethics, however, keep the blowback from happening inevitably in the future, because what happens is that later on down the line, that shit always catches up with you. EA, take a fucking, do some logic. Bad ethics will always catch up to you eventually, one way or another. Either it happens through natural course, like for example, you manipulate and bleed a market dry and it implodes, and thus you have no more business because your market imploded. That would be the .com bust, right? Or for example, the market housing bust, right? Everybody should buy a house. Buying a house equals freedom. It's the American dream, right? Buy a house, buy a house, buy a house. All this marketing, everybody can buy a house. You're qualified for a house. Go ahead, get one. And guess what? The market collapsed because of lack of ethics. Ethics always comes back to bite you. Or, lack of ethics always comes back to bite you, yeah? But for the people that were being unethical at that time, it was profitable. It was just, in the long run, it ended up actually, coming back with backlash. That's the key. And they're like saying, so for example, 20% of US clothing sales are now plus size. That is actually has nothing to do with that has nothing to do with it on there. Contrary to popular myth, the ethics and profits don't mix. The tapping of these markets have proven to be highly profitable. No. So this is the conflation of the concept of ethics and smart marketing. So market inclusion might happen. So for example, you might have a really high grade brand, Gucci for example, or Versace, something like that, one of the high fashion brands, right? Their clothing probably doesn't come in anything above a size 7, for like say a fancy dress for a woman, probably doesn't come above a size 7, right? For guys clothing with like say Armani, right? Probably can't find an Armani suit that is for a very portly fellow, right? Because they want to sell themselves to the elite, the sexy, the beautiful people. Because like when you're rich and you look good, what are you wearing? You're wearing this brand, this elite brand that's for elite people called Versace or Armani. It's this kind of concept, and that's what they're selling. And they are very exclusive, and they have selective marketing. But I feel like this overall concept that they're talking about here is a little, it's truth mixed with falsehood. Like I said, that when they're trying to say that contrary to popular myth, that ethics and profits don't mix, this is actually, so this is what this is doing is it's inserting it's what's known as a Mott and Bailey, right? Tapping of these niche markets has proven highly profitable. Yes, that is true. That's the safe one, right? But ethics and profits don't mix. They just have to be in balance, right? So that bugs me whenever you get people that are trying to fucking push political agendas in their goddamn Wikipedia article. I'll probably go and edit just this bit out of here and skip out the bullshit here. This statement doesn't need to be here, you stupid people. Let me move on. That's not what we're talking about today. In any case, the kind of final point I want to kind of drive on here is that marketing, brand marketing specifically, can be done in an ethical manner. But what you really need to focus on is you need to focus on making sure you constantly are keeping pace with your audience. As you become more profitable as a company, you start taking off. Man, you're like an airplane taking off on the runway. That sky is looking beautiful, isn't it? Except you forgot that your customer is still on the ground. And it becomes harder and harder to see that customer as you get further and further away from the ground. That's what a bunch of businesses out there and large corporations forget as time goes on. They end up getting that whole problem of taking off on the ground, getting rich, getting that paycheck rolling in, and they start to lose touch with their customer. They take off the ground, they lose touch with the ground. Smart companies sometimes will fall into that trap, and then we'll get a reality check, and then we'll take themselves back to basics, right? I feel like that's something that happened to Microsoft, and they still are kind of trying to center themselves a bit. That happened to EA in 2013 and 2014 when they won Worst Company in America 2 years in a row. And they were doing great, and then they started to pull fuckery again, and it's like, well, why even bother? They apparently did not learn. But you have a lot of companies out there that know how to keep in touch with their customer base intimately, and will do a good job of driving home what they know their customers want. For example, something I noticed on there, and this isn't always 100% accurate, but Nintendo is a good example of a company that tries to keep themselves somewhat grounded, I guess you could say, in the sense that they try to know where their audience is coming from. While Xbox and PlayStation are busy bickering with each other on which is the better console, who's got better exclusives, fanboys of those consoles are arguing about it, which is what the corporations want, by the way. That way they don't have to pay for advertising. You little fucking drones can do it for them. Anyway, the main thing about it is that Nintendo, on the other hand, has been focused on, well, how do we really distinctify our hardware? If I took the shell off of an Xbox One, a PlayStation, if I wiped the operating system off of it, right, and said, here, these play games, and you pop in a game disc with no label on it, you got magic marker writing on it on top of it telling you what game it is, and it just goes directly into the game. You see no operating system, you see no shell, no branding, anything on the consoles. You could not tell the Xbox 4 or Xbox One from the PlayStation 4. They might as well be the same fucking thing. The Nintendo Switch, you take the shell off that, take all the branding off of that, load it directly into the game. Oh, it's definitely fucking different from an Xbox or a PlayStation. You cannot mistake that. It is 100% different. And I think that's something they have kept a little bit more perspective on that than I think the other console makers have, who are trying to have this like arms race with each other over, oh, we have slightly better performance now, and the PC is over there laughing like, yeah, it's still not as good as PC. And Switch is like, we're not even going to compete with any of that because that doesn't help us at all. That's actually bad for us to try to jump in there, because that's not what our customers want. Our customers want what we've offered. We've done, and I was saying years ago, I was like, man, wouldn't it be awesome if they just took the Wii U and made it all mobile? Because they own the mobile market, right? The Nintendo DS owns the mobile market, and the Switch, guess what? It's now owning the mobile market, and chances are it's probably going to sell so much that it'll probably end up owning the console market too. That is because they've kept their eyes on the ground. They've kept themselves grounded, in touch with customers, at least from a marketing standpoint. Xbox and Microsoft and Sony, they're becoming more and more disconnected, as I noticed with as it goes on. They are more looking at each other more than they are their customers. And I think that's kind of the problem. And unfortunately, you have an army of fanboys underneath each of them who are also focused on each other rather than looking anywhere else. I digress. It is what it is. But so I'll kind of close off with a bit of I guess you could say a bit of knowledge on here. Is that in my experience, the company who is able to best keep the audience trusting them as humble. The audience thinks you are humble and you're down to earth. They're more likely to stick with you and believe that you are genuine. Not to say that there aren't people out there that there's not people out there that want someone who's arrogant, especially when you get into like elite brands or niche markets like that. But I would say that for the most part, it's really the more genuine you could be and the more realistic your approach to marketing is, like the less you try to fill people with bullshit, the better your customer loyalty is built and the more the greater longevity your company will have. Anyway, we're going to start looking into grabbing someone to host over here. I see that Anchor654 is online streaming some Witcher 3. By the way, Witcher 3 is made by a company called CD Projekt Red, who is an amazing indie developer. They are indie, not AAA. And they actually are also fairly down to earth. They tend to try to keep right in pace with their customers, as was noted whenever the scandal came out with loot boxes with Battlefront 2, and there were accusations that, like, essentially they had said something about wanting to have a more kind of long-term play style to Cyberpunk 2077, which someone took as there's going to be loot boxes and it's going to be games as a service. By the way, is a horrible fucking term. And CD Projekt Red was like, no, that's not at all what we're doing. We'll leave the greed to other people. My thought is they very well may have been planning that. They aren't now, because they saw that kind of instant backlash, and they're like, okay guys, get back over here. We got to really quickly clean up this mess. Kind of like what Sony did whenever Microsoft announced the Xbox and everybody backlash at the always online thing. I highly suspect that the PS4 had an always online component. They saw the backlash to Xbox One's announcement, and they quickly went and said, oh, yep, we're going to clean that up. That's not going to be a part of things. I highly suspect that that's the case. No proof of that. Well, I guess Anchor's stream is actually ending now, so I guess we are going to hop over and throw a stream to Sparius ECG, because he's streaming looks like Cyberpunk Dexter. Oh god. Well, this should be loads of fun. He's playing Dex, which is another great game that is loads of fun, very colorful, very pretty game. So we're gonna throw a host over to him, and hopefully jump off there before Anchor throws a host at me, because that would be awkward for trying to host each other when we're both going offline. Anyway, I'm gonna get hopped off here, guys. We'll be back on Friday with another playthrough of Divinity Original Sin. If you guys want to check it out there, 7 p.m. Pacific time. Obviously, links down below for Discord, Twitter, all that good stuff. You guys can check me out there. And we'll catch you on Friday. Guys, have fun. Enjoy your weekend. And remember, keep a level head on your shoulders.